There is no telling which way this trial is going to go. It has already gone sideways 10 billion, gillion, trillion times, and I think it will continue to do so. And I have some thoughts and opinions on all that. Just keep in mind that I ain't a doctor, I ain't a lawyer, I ain't none of that fancy stuff. I'm just a guy with a sofa, a little doggy back there, a camera, and some opinions on true crime. So let's go ahead and jump on into the Alex Murdaugh trial. Hello, Sofa Squad, and welcome back to the sofa. That's the sofa back there, and as you can see, our trusty sidekick, Mr. Roscoe, he's back there holding it down back there. I do appreciate everybody joining, and I appreciate everybody who makes the channel possible. Thank you to all the top tier Patreon members, thank you to the channel members, and thank you to everybody who stays in the comments and talks with me, talks about the victims, their stories, their lives, and keeps the doors open and the cushions fluffed here at the Sofa Squad. I greatly appreciate it. Now, today what we're going to be doing is this. Like I said in the intro, the trial is in progress. Many of us have been watching it, right? A lot of you have come and asked me what I think about it. We did a couple of live chats on it. And so every day that goes by, there's like more stuff I want to talk about. But what I want to do is use this video specifically to look at three different parts of the trial. First of all, opening statements by defense and state. Secondly, one quick clip by Brian Enton, some crying clips, and then which just came out tonight, like 20 minutes ago, right, is the the police car interview with Alex, like right after they came there to the kennels and, you know, this happened, right? So I want to talk about that. I'll put some clips up. We can discuss them, and I'm going to use them basically as talking points to discuss how I think this is going to go, how I see it happening, that type thing, because I have some theories. I talked with some of y'all in the live chat about it. Some of you are like, nah, some of you are like, yeah. So I'm curious to see what ends up happening, because at the end of the day, like, if you've been following this, you already know this is a crazy story with so many turns and twists in it. So let's go ahead and jump on into the first clip, what is going on with the opening statements.
On the evening of June 7th, 2021, at the defendant's property off Moselle Road in Colleton County, his son Paul Murdaugh was standing in a small feed room in some kennels they had on the property. About 8:50 p.m., and the defendant over there, Alex Murdaugh, took a 12 in the shoulder, in the chest and the shoulder, with buckshot. And the evidence is going to show it was a 1,000,000-to-1 shot. He could have survived that, but after that, another shot went up under his head and did catastrophic damage.
Ooh, okay, so this is the state they're opening, and they are coming in hot, okay? Now, one thing that I think that clearly we can see here is the state is creating imagery, they're creating a picture, and this is the first thing they're coming in with, right? And so I think that we're seeing this play out, right, in the trial, but as well as the opening. To me, whenever we see opening statements by, whether it's the state or the defense, being able to tell the story and translate and create that picture, a believable story to the jury is key here. Now, we're going to keep listening to what he is saying happening, because again, I don't know about y'all, but when I watch these, like most of the time, it's like by the time the state's done with the opening, I'm like, done, finished. Go ahead and ring him up. He's out of here. And the defense will come up and counter this stuff. And a lot of times I'm like, well, yeah, you know what? Let him go. Let him go. Now, I don't really feel that way in this one so far. I can tell you that. But just keep that in mind. So let's continue to see how the state is painting this picture of that horrible night.
Just moments later, he picked up a .300 Blackout, which is a type of ammunition, but an AR-style rifle. And the evidence is going to show that the family had multiple weapons throughout the property, picked up that .300 Blackout rifle, and opened fire on his wife, Maggie, just feet away near some sheds that used to be a hangar. Pow, pow. 2 shots, abdomen and the leg, and took her down. And after that, there were additional shots, including 2 shots to the head that, again, did catastrophic damage.
Again, continuing on with the tragic story of what has happened, the pop, talking about exactly what went down, painting the picture, seeing in our minds Maggie running away is all absolutely heartbreaking, right? But then pointing to Alec over there, sitting there doing that, I mean, it's very effective.
Neither one of them had any defensive wounds, as if they didn't see a threat coming from their attacker.
Now notice how he has like all linebacker in it, like neither of them had any defensive wounds. You know what I mean? Like kind of crouching down there. Again, he's good at showing the story playing out, creating the visual effect. But also, we're going to hear what the defense has to say about this, because this is a key thing that I want to talk about too when we get to it, is he's saying like there's no defensive wounds, so it's like they knew the attacker, that type thing, which is an excellent point to bring up. But we're also going to talk about what the defense has to say about this very thing when they counter it in the opening statements. First of all, excellent tactic on his part about they go silent forever and ever, that finality of it, that, the ominous part of it. But also when they talk about the cell phone data, and we talked about this in the live stream the other night about how that technology, that kind of evidence, it's constantly changing, right? Now, this is going to be a key point to me when they get into this in the trial. And again, depending on when you're seeing this, they could have already gotten into that or not. So this is either theory at this point, or we would have heard the evidence. Again, it just depends on when you're watching this. At this point in time, I have not seen the evidence about the actual more than this that we're seeing right here. But that being said, I'm always very suspicious over any kind of cell phone data. I want to see it exactly. I want to make sure, like, okay, what are we dealing with here? Because oftentimes we see within a year or two, it's like, oh, well, now we can do this and now we can do that. And especially in this case, there's so much of, well, the kennels were this far away from the house and you could see this, but you couldn't see that. So why did he call here? And 1 minute later they were here. I mean, time is crucial in this and how far one can be in different places. And it's all very quickly in a very small amount of time that a lot of different things happened. And so that's where it will also play into some of my theories that I had about like maybe what could have been going on in regards to how involved, if not directly, that Alex could be. So, but we'll revisit that here in a minute. Let's keep watching for now.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Creighton Waters. I'm with the Attorney General's office and I'll be the lead prosecutor. I introduced myself before. With me is David Fernandez, Savannah Gow, John Metters, Don Zelinka, John Conrad, and Johnny James. A lot of lawyers. This is a big case.
One thing I like that he did here is right after he does this like huge, mic drop kind of an intro, he immediately introduces himself, his team, investigators. He personalizes it. He gives a name to it. He makes them seem familiar to the jury and whatnot. I thought this was a good tactic, and it just personalized the whole scenario for me at least.
You're going to see video statements of Alec Murdoch. You're going to see body-worn camera of him at the scene when law enforcement arrives. And hear what he says. And hear what he says about that night. You're going to hear 3 recorded statements on video that he gave with law enforcement. And you're going to hear how things progress about what he says and what he says he did that night. Watch those closely. Watch his expressions. Listen to what he's saying. Listen to what he's not saying.
Now, like I said, one of those videos that, it's out. We're going to talk about it at the end of this. And yes, the evidence they're laying out, this is stuff that I'm 100% like, yes, let's see this kind of stuff. This is huge. This can help paint a narrative.
Use that common sense. Does this seem right? Or does something seem a little off? Something seems a little off about this. I mentioned that Maggie was killed with a .300 blackout rifle, an AR-style rifle, but chambered in .300 blackout ammunition. And you're going to hear evidence that back in Christmas of 2016, Alec Murdoch over there bought 2 .300 blackout AR-style rifles. And that not long after that, one of them went missing from Paul's truck.
Now, again, he's going to go into this huge amount of evidence about the weapons, firearms. A lot of this stuff has come up. And again, this was a gun family. These were hunters, right? So in this context, it's very normal in this context to have guns all over the place and whatnot. Now, where it is not going to be normal is for what some of the evidence looks like, because yes, it's not a cute look for Alec when it comes down to weapons use, things of this nature. But again, this is just the opening and pretending like we might not know some of this stuff that's already come out or whatever. You know, he's selling a big story to, you know, have to come up with the evidence to or whatever, which I think they have come up with a lot of it. And it's very damning evidence and whatnot. But again, this also is very big to me when we see these cases and whatnot, and they deal with whether it's, you know, guns or whatever, is dealing with the, okay, can we 100% can we connect the weapon to A, B, and C, that type of situation. So let's continue to the next clip.
And time went by, and in April of 2018, Alec Murdaugh replaced that rifle and bought another one. 3 total blackout rifles that they had. One of them went missing years ago, and a replacement was bought.
Now, before we talk about this clip, can we just say, is it not like clockwork? And all of these cases and trials that we watch, there is a perpetual cougher in the crowd. I've never seen anything like it in my life. It's like they pay someone to go and do it. I mean, my gosh. And then they cough at every time you're trying to hear something is when they're going to cough. It drives me crazy. So anyways, yes, he's going to go into the evidence about the guns, and this one was missing, and this one was that. But then all of a sudden, this one was used, but now it's missing and that. And again, this is the kind of stuff that just doesn't look good overall, right? Now, again, we already know, which they're not going to bring, you know, we're not seeing a ton of this stuff yet, right? But anyone who's been looking at the paper and knows all these other cases going on, this is shady behavior. It might as well be Alex's middle name, right? So this kind of stuff is just par for the course.
That killed her. It was a family weapon that killed Maggie Murdaugh. And you're going to hear evidence that of those 3 blackouts that Alec Murdaugh purchased, when law enforcement arrives at the scene on June 7th, 2021, he can only account for one of them. He can only account for one of them. And that replacement gun is nowhere to be found.
Now, of course, this could be a scenario of, this could go many different directions, right? And I'll talk more about this at the end, but also this kind of evidence right here, I think is going to be very easy to be like, oh, you know, number one, Paul's, you know, alleged to be the type that's like, I left this here, I left that there, that type scenario. I think that the defense, which is going to be one of their big things, poking holes in all of these, as he'll call them, theories, is how they'll go about doing this. Regardless, it doesn't look good. This is where you get into, there's a lot of coincidences going on with Mr. Alex.
Mr. Alec Murdaugh's father had died, Mr. Randolph, and about a week after the murders, he shows up early in the morning at his parents' home, where his mother still is in late-stage Alzheimer's, on Alameda in Hampton. It's uncharacteristic for him to show up early, uncharacteristic for him to show up at all like that, and he comes in and he's carrying something in a blue tarp, and he takes it upstairs, and eventually law enforcement finds out about that. And they go upstairs, and they find a wadded up, very, very large raincoat in a blue color. Could look like a tarp. And you're going to hear evidence that it was coated with gunshot residue on the inside.
Now again, the GSR evidence in this case is not going to be good. And again, this kind of explosive testimony right here, and I'm sorry, not testimony, but narrative and an opening statement. I mean, this is major, right? I was on the edge of my seat when I watched this. I was like, oh my gosh, he went there and hid evidence in the mother's house, and he did this and did that. But in a minute, we're going to hear what the defense has to say about it.
On the inside. You're going to hear other evidence of gunshot residue. You're going to hear that there was gunshot residue on Alec at the scene. You're going to hear the evidence that there was gunshot residue on the seatbelt of the car he was driving.
Now, again, they're just going over this GSR, and again, I think a lot of the GSR will be stuff that the defense just poke holes in, and I'll talk more about my thoughts on that, but I think that some GSR, obviously there's the science behind it of how much and da-da-da and all that kind of stuff, you know, as to where it is and whatnot, because of course, there's all this kind of contradicting stuff, and we'll see when we'll see Alec in the car with the white t-shirt, not much is on him, you know, but this whole thing of him being around the bodies and touching them and this kind of thing, right? So some of it can sound good of, oh, well, you know, he did this, so of course it would get on the seatbelt or this or that. But then other parts of it are, or what if he was maybe around someone else who was using a weapon? We'll see.
At 8:44 and 55 seconds, Paul recorded a video. He was down at the kennels because he had been talking to a friend of his, and you're going to hear from this friend because his friend's dog was in the kennels and they thought there was something wrong with the tail. And Paul was recording a video of it to send to his friend. 8:44 and 55 seconds. And on that video, and you'll see that video, and you'll hear from witnesses that identify Paul's voice, Maggie's voice, and Alec's voice.
Now, this is the bombshell stuff I'm talking about that I want to see in an opening damn statement, okay? I'm just going to call that out. Okay, so this is the bombshell stuff. You know, they were dropping all this stuff right before this happened. There's video. Paul did a Snapchat or whatever it was, you know, before this, and everybody's like, what's the video? What's the video? And then here he's claiming it puts Alec at the kennels. And so, of course, this is huge, right? Because this, again, like I said earlier, the phone evidence, not residence, the phone evidence, all this kind of stuff is going to add up to really paint a picture of how could he have done this in this amount of time, that type of situation. And so, again, with that particular evidence, we just need to see and hear exactly how it plays out, because this could, you know, be very detrimental to Alex's case. Now let's take a look at Alex's defense team, the defense's opening, and talk about a few parts of that.
It is our honor to represent Alec Murdaugh, or Murdoch, depending on how you pronounce it. I say it's our honor because I submit to you what you have heard from the Attorney General as facts are not. They're his theories, his conjecture.
So obviously the defense is coming in a little bit different here, a little bit slower, a little bit more subdued. But one thing that he does that's very interesting is the whole thing of, I'm honored to represent Alec, and he does the, you know, Murdoch, he addresses the name thing about how people pronounce it. Remember, this name, Alec, the family, this is like, you know, low country royalty, right? And so they are very well known. So he's reconnecting, in my opinion, that whole thing, trying to get away from the tarnished name, the tarnished reputation of, I'm honored to be representing this man, like almost like a shot back to a call back to, I didn't mean to say that, shot back, my God. I'd like subconsciously come up with this stuff, and I don't even mean to say it, like a call back, Lord help me, to, you know, the glory days of Alex's name. And I thought that was a good tactic on his part, to try and maybe make him somewhat relatable to the jury, which is gonna be an uphill battle.
Now stand up. This is Alec Murdaugh. And Alec was the loving father of Paul and the loving husband of Maggie. You're not going to hear a single witness say that their relationship, Maggie and Alex's relationship, were anything other than loving. You're going to hear about how they went to a baseball game the weekend before.
Now, just this clip right here can make me lose sleep. Let's talk about a few things in it. First of all, when he was like, Alex, go on, stand up now, son, stand up. I was like, Oh my God. Like, do you know how awkward that would be? Like, even in, take the context of the scenario out, right? I'm like, oh my God, you would feel like the entire world is staring at you, kind of because they are, right? So I was just like, ugh, I'm so glad I'm not him for obvious reasons, but then just regardless of, I wouldn't want to be standing up in that room like that. Okay, so there's that. Then I started thinking about this when I saw it. Do I think they will put him on the stand? You know, because I was like, well, he wants him to stand up, you know, be proud, poke your chest out, boy, kind of a thing, right? So I was like, are they going to put him on the stand? Like, this would be horrible. I can't imagine that he would testify. I've tried to take the temperature on my opinion on that because some of you have asked me that. I don't think he will. Again, don't hold me to it. We have Daryl Brooks, right? I mean, for God's sakes, like, anything is possible, right? So I just don't think he will. Obviously, I do not think it will go well for him at all. Okay, we're gonna watch the tape of his interview in the car. So I don't think it would go well for him. Anyways, let's keep going. So there's that. Now, the other thing, when he starts talking about the marriage, and he's like, no one's going to testify. One thing that the defense will do, and this will get us into this conversation, is I think the defense is going to pick apart evidence, pick apart testimony. I think that's going to be really a lot of their tactic, right? And oftentimes it is, right? It's not their obligation to prove anything. It's the state's obligation. The state's going to put it up, and the defense is going to tear it apart if they can, right? And I think that's what he's doing, but it's almost like one of those technical things. So let's say that Alec and Maggie behind closed doors were fine. Well, there's other stuff going on that things weren't so happy and you know, Alec and Maggie land, right? She was finding out some stuff. All this was going on. So while they might be able to get up there and confidently say, well, no one's going to talk about, you know, anything, they could have very well been a very shiny, happy couple on the outside. I mean, look at, they were in the limelight. They were basically local celebrities, right? So they probably were used to having to live that way. So that part, I'm just like, okay, yeah, that's what you often see when you want to get real technical about things. And I think both the state and the defense, maybe not specifically in here, but you see this in any kind of case.
Paul, the apple of his eye. You're going to see a video somewhere between 7:30 and 8 o'clock the night of the murders with Paul and Alec riding around looking at some trees they planted. It's a Snapchat.
And here's the thing, none of us want to think or believe that a father, a mother, a parent, or even another human being, right, can do this kind of stuff to their own family. And I think the defense is really going to try and hone in on that and separate that imagery from Alex. Like, this is not something he's capable of. This is his son. They were looking at trees they planted. They were doing Snapchat, you know, the whole 9 yards, right? Because at the end of the day, we don't want to believe that. It does not help that we've seen the lengths that he's gone to out of desperation. So already I'm like, well, let me say this real quick. I get as the jury, they have to put all this aside, right? But we ain't the jury, right? We're just the Sofa Squad. So I'm taking other things into consideration, whereas the jury can't do that, right? So for me, I'm like, look, you know, this guy staged his own downfall inside the road with his cousin. He did this, he did that. I mean, there's so much scandal. So it's not a far cry to think that he did or orchestrated this being done to Maggie and Paul, for me at least. And so, but the defense trying to paint this picture like almost like damage control for image, it's one of the only tactics they're going to have.
And by the way, that shot would indicate it was in the chest and came out under his arm, like somebody that might have been holding up their hands. So when he says no defensive wounds, he perhaps was being held at shotgun. I mean, I can make the same sort of speculation.
Now, what he did right there, remember how the state was like talking about what he just said? And he's doing, again, the imagery, like he was being held like this. And, you know, I could speculate just like he is. You know, technically he doesn't know. We weren't there, that type of thing. I mean, again, whether we like it or not, he's bringing up some good points because also remember, his job is to create reasonable doubt. You know, now here's my thing. When I go back and try and walk through, and I'm sitting here thinking and imagining all three of them down the dog kennels, and Alec knows what's going to happen, and he's just waiting for the right time to grab whatever weapon he chooses, and then he turns around and has this pointed at Paul. You know, I think your first reaction would be like, what, you know, whoa, Dad, even if you know him or not, right? Now, obviously, you know, for the state saying, well, there was no defensive wounds, he didn't try and fight back. You see where this starts to kind of negate the arguments on both sides. So, yeah. Do I think it will hold up? Time will tell.
And the way they did that, they had to open it or have access. Who gave them the code to open the phone? Alec Murdaugh.
Again with the coughing. Now what he's talking about is Maggie's phone that was found, and Mr. Helpful Alec Murdaugh, you know, he gave him the code. Y'all, I mean, come on. Chris Watts got on the porch talking about, you know, let's bring her home and I just want the kids home. I mean, this doesn't hold water with me, and this is one of those things that I'm like, I get he's doing his job, but that doesn't matter to me, right? Because he probably already had a story lined up, as we'll see, to go with this narrative type thing lined up. So when you get into this type thing of, well, he was being helpful and handed the phone, that doesn't matter.
As he cranks his car, as the cell phone records show that, as the telemetry data shows the cell phone linking up with the car, that phone is being thrown on the side of the road almost a half a mile away. Now that is Houdini. That is magic. That is inexplicable.
Now, this is the kind of evidence that I'm talking about that enough of it creates that reasonable doubt of, well, how is the phone doing this and how is this? I'm going to talk about it when we get to the end of his clips about my overall thought process of what I think could be taking place. So let's continue watching for now.
GSR, their own expert at SLED says the amount of particles of GSR are consistent with him going up and picking that shotgun up. They want to talk about GSR?
Again, he's got a little bit of a point here, and the evidence will be ultimately what tells that. And again, picking that apart, getting technical, that type thing will create that doubt and create an overall thing of, did he really physically have his hands on and do it? That type thing.
And by the way, they seized his clothes from that night. They've never searched his house for any other clothes that we know of. Although that night, he gave permission and they got a search warrant. Go to my house. Go look through everything.
Again, I have no doubt that he was helpful, right? I have no doubt at all. He probably was very helpful because he probably thought in his role that he already covered his tracks. Remember, he's an attorney himself, right? I mean, it comes from a long family of this. So he already is schooled in, you know, I get he wasn't maybe a criminal attorney like this, but there's already this mindset of how to create an alibi, how to create this type of stuff. So that doesn't hold much water for me.
As you sit there right now, when you look at him, you have to believe he is innocent. He didn't do it.
And this is very true, and this is what the jury has to be held to, right? They have to put all this stuff aside, and they have to assume and presume that he is innocent. And I'm very much trying to look at it in that context. If you follow me, you know, I'm really not too shy about my biases, you know. And on that note, my bias with this is, yes, I've been following this. Yes, I think he's totally guilty. You know, there is that. But I'm really trying to sit on the fence and be like, let's see what they have to say and let's look at it. And that's kind of feeding into some of my overall thoughts that we're about to get into. Out of my chair, if the state was like, objection, and they shot him down, that was like a lie or something, I would have been like, wrap it up. This is done.
That witness who said he showed up with a blue tarp was shown a blue rain jacket that he talked about. Said, that's not it. That's not what he brought here that morning.
Again, this is the kind of stuff, poking holes in the state's evidence and theories and all that.
I say something or do something, which most certainly based on my career, I will do, that irritates you or angers you. Sometimes I'm a little rough. Don't hold that against Alec. Hold it against me. If I say something that offends you in some way, don't hold that against Alec. Hold it against me.
Now, I like that he went ahead and called this out because oftentimes what we see happen is, you know, the defense comes out and they have to do some real hard-hitting questions of questioning victims and people and saying things that kind of upsets us. And so I get like this whole thing of being like, look, be, you know, upset with me, but not Alec. That was a very good tactic on his part. I'll give him that.
Remember, as you sit there right now, in your mind, he didn't do it.
Very powerful closing statements there. And now what we're going to do is we're going to very quickly look at a quick clip. This is from Brian Enton, and this is just some shots of Alec in the courtroom, some, waterworks shots. So let's just take a moment. So as we see him, he's sitting here, he's wiping his nose, he's crying, he's weeping, hearing this type of stuff. And, I don't know how to feel about the openly crying and the things of this nature in the courtroom. Here's my thing. I don't know how I would act and react in that type of situation. So who am I to say, right? Would I be crying when I heard these horrible things about what happened to my family? Maybe, that type thing. I always feel like, though, when I see people doing this in the courtroom, right, in these kind of cases, and I go back to like Michael Peterson in The Staircase, where he wouldn't even try and wipe tears away, like he wanted everyone to see it. I feel like it's just, there's a part of it that's very showy, right? And then oftentimes I wonder, I'm like, are they crying because of what they've lost? Like, they know what they did, they know what they lost, and they're crying for that loss, but not because of like, oh my gosh, Paul and Maggie are gone, but life would be better if I hadn't done that, like, and we were back there, but not really, it hasn't sunk into them yet, right? So, I go back and forth with me at my biases when I see this type of behavior, and it's very circumstantial depending on what's going on in the case. In this one in particular, it's not working for me. I'm like, it's giving me bad mojo. Now, before we watch a few clips from the interview in the car, I just want to say these couple of things. So again, like I said, my bias that I'm going into this with, right, I'll just call it out, is yes, I think he did do this. Where I am changing my mind a little bit on some things is this. A little bit, right? So this is where I keep going back to. I personally think that somebody else was involved with him. And I go back to this because of the timing of stuff and all this crazy things. And I feel like if he set the whole thing up to, remember how he set the thing up on the side of the road with his cousin? I'm like, this man knows so many people. This is 1,700 acres, right? The timing of it was so crazy, the GSR and all this. Who's to say he didn't have somebody else waiting there? Hey, y'all, let's go down and check on the dogs. They go down there. Maybe they all walked. Maybe they took their car and they all rode in it down there. And that's why their other car wasn't there. The staged thing comes out and does that, and it all goes down. Paul miraculously is saved. He's able to get rid of the person. He leaves, drops them off somewhere, whatever he does, and then does this whole thing of calling Maggie on the way back. The phone is thrown out over here. However, it went down, right? Now, does this mean that I feel like, Paul or Alec couldn't have done this? No, 100% I could see him doing it, right? I don't want to think that I could see him doing that, because I don't want to think that anyone, like I said, could do that to anyone, especially someone to their own child, their wife, anybody, right? So I go in two directions with that, because I'm kind of like, well, if he didn't personally do it, like he was the sole person with his hands on it, then I'm like 100% he had somebody come, like this was a setup of some level, Now that will segue into this whole police car thing, because again, you're talking about a whole bunch of, why is he acting this way? And how is he acting like that? So just buckle your seatbelts up and let's look at a few of those clips real quick like. Okay, so let's go ahead and watch some of these clips. He's in the car with the cops. This hat is right after, the whole event went down. He's found the bodies, the whole 9 yards. One thing I want to focus on is some behavioral type stuff in here. So let's just watch a couple of clips, use those as starting points for talking points.
And spell your last name so I get it correct.
Murdaughh.
All right.
Okay, we see here he's very normal acting, not much going on. Let's keep going.
I hate to have to do this.
I understand.
Yeah.
I totally
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah.
So you don't have any problem
Yeah.
with it.
So,
Now, I put that up there just to kind of continue on the narrative of this level of normalcy, but the head bobbing thing, we see him doing this in court too. I don't know if that's a nervous thing, a condition thing. One thing I'm keeping in mind, everyone keep in mind, is during this, this is when active addiction for him, that he was doing all these kinds of, stuff and pills and all this kind of stuff, right? So I wonder how much of his behavior in this is influenced by that, like basically if he was under the influence of something, because he comes off when he reverts back to this, which is his to me, his bottom, like his normal, I don't know what they call it in his behavioral panel shows and stuff, where it's like his baseline, I think it's called. To me, his baseline is this like catatonic state. Now, here's the thing. Anyone would be that way, right? And I'm thinking, even if he was part of what took place, I think that he would still be that way. I'll delve more into my thoughts on that when we get to the end of this, but just keep those things in mind as we watch.
I ran out. I knew it was really bad. My boy over there, I could see it was...
So here he's upset, he starts to cry. Now he doesn't do this very often and for very long, and then he'll go back to his normalcy. Here's my thing with this. Again, I have no idea how I'd react in this. And don't misconstrue me. I guess what I'm trying to say is, don't think I'm making excuses for him, because I have some theories on this. And a huge theory is that I wonder if he is under the influence of whatever stuff that he does, right? Because the stuff that he was allegedly hooked on, this is stuff you do all day, every day, right? So I wonder how much of that's going on and is influencing his, ability to kind of have this, deadpan thing. But then also how much of this is shock, how much of this is that type thing. Now, again, this is not assuming that he had nothing to do with it, right? I'll get more into what I think about that after we watch these next few clips. Here we go.
And I ran over to Maggie, and actually, I think I tried to turn Paul over first.
Now, this is the part where he seems like kind of shocked. And I'll just go ahead and say this. Part of me watching this, and I still wonder this, and I go back and forth with it, if Paul was collateral damage, if he was not supposed to be in the mix with this. But then I also go back to, it seems like he caused Alec, the family, a lot of trouble, meaning the boat incident, which he'll talk about here in a minute. So I'm like, well, if there is that, maybe, he knows no low, meaning Alec, and it was like, look, we've got to do A, B, and C, and so here it goes. That type of scenario. So I go back and forth with that, because part of me is like, maybe he is sensing this whole thing of like, oh my God, like Paul wasn't supposed to be part of what went down tonight, if that makes sense. Let's keep watching.
What made you come out here tonight?
I went to, my mom's a late stage Alzheimer's patient. My dad's in the hospital. My mom gets anxious.
Now, of course, this is the story that he starts to tell that we've heard now about his alibi, basically, right? And this is the thing that, when I was watching this is I was doing this, and then I went to go do this, and I went to go do that. Now, again, I don't know how I would react in this type of situation, but a lot of it kind of seems like, wow, he really has this kind of down, right? Like this whole entire, like, it all makes too much perfect sense, is what I'm trying to say.
How about yours and Maggie's?
Wonderful. I mean, I'm sure we had little things here and there, but we had a wonderful marriage, wonderful relationship.
And yours and Paul's relationship?
As good as it could be.
Now, again, with this, everything's perfect, everything's shiny, happy people. And I do think it was interesting that he said it was as good as it could be, that type thing. Now, maybe there's, you never know, father-son, they can have strained relationship, who knows, but it didn't sound like that in other things. But I just thought that was interesting how he said that.
Have y'all been having any problems out here? Trespassers,
None
people breaking in?
None that I know of. The only thing what comes to my mind is my son Paul was in a boat wreck a couple years ago, and there's been he was charged with being arrested for being the driver. Now,
another thing with this is instantly goes into the story about the boat. Now, again, he's like, hey, is there anything that's up? And da-da-da-da-da. And the dad will go into a deeper narrative, but again, there's something about it that's almost too... This slot fits here perfectly. This, it has a little nice ribbon on it, is what I'm trying to say, I guess.
Has he, other than being assaulted, has he received any direct threats related to the boat accident?
Oh, yes. All the time. He gets
recently?
Again, oh, he gets these all the time, all this. And now this is a thing. I mean, a young lady lost her life. And if you've been following the case, you know there's so much drama around this family and loss of life around this family. So, I mean, the dad's not necessarily lying about this, right? But still, it is very, you know...
So is there anybody that you can think of that we need to talk to tonight? Is there a name that comes to mind?
I mean, I can't tell you anybody that I'm overly suspicious of off the top of my head.
Okay.
You know? I mean, this is such a stupid thing. I'm even embarrassed to say it. But it just didn't make any sense. I just hired a guy out here, and he wasn't cutting the mustard, but I hadn't told him this yet. Paul's been working with him a lot. He killed the sunflower seeds in our dove field just recently, which is why Paul was here doing this. He told Paul a story the other day about how when he was in high school, he got in a fight with some black guys. And the FBI undercover team observed him fighting those guys.
Okay, now here's the other thing with this. So all of a sudden he's come up with all this stuff. Like, okay, we have, you know, Paul's getting in fights here. Oh, the new guy that we're working, he burned the sunflower seeds and then came up with a story about doing this crazy stuff. But he will go on to say, they get along. I really don't think it's him, but I need to say it. Again, it's also perfect. He has these little nuggets to drop off along the way for the story that he's giving the detectives, the officers. And remember, this is the Murdaugh family. He has this name to go on.
It's like, for example, he went out in Charleston a couple months ago, came back, you know, he got a black eye. And, you know, he can't defend himself right now because he has these charges. So, you know, Paul was a real tough man's man. You know, he would just...
So now he's gone out, he's gotten in fights, but he can't defend himself, he can't do this. So there's all this like stuff surrounding Paul, which again, we're going to be very interested to see how this all comes out in court and how the defense team uses this to create this reasonable doubt of other theories and things of this nature that it could have been Alec, you know, because Paul had all these enemies out there.
I mean, Paul is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful kid. He can do almost anything. He gets along with almost anybody.
Now, again, I don't doubt that he really feels this way about him, right? And I have no doubt that he probably was a very wonderful kid. There's just something going on here with Alec that I'm not buying. But again, under the circumstances, I think this is one of these cases where there's possible to be two things at one time. He can be regretful about what happened, he can be sad about what happened, and he can also have had his hand in something that happened. Even if it was as simple as placing the phone call, knowing it's going down, and maybe things went sideways. Or maybe we've got to, you know, unfortunately, it is what it is, we got to charge it at the game, but both of them got to go type situation. You know, who really knows? I've got one more clip to watch, and then we'll tidy this up.
I texted her at 9:08, going to check on M, be right back. And then I texted her at 9:47. That must be when I started to come back. I think I called her before that.
Now, here's the thing. So he lists all these times off. I called here, I did this, be right back, Now, he will say, Maggie usually didn't go over there with me, and it's no big deal, and, you know, she's always at the kennels, so this is normal. But then I'm also like, well, then why are you blowing her phone up? You know, constantly. You're calling and texting and doing this. That doesn't seem normal to me. You know, it also doesn't seem normal to me and this is already brought up in court, I'm like, well, why wouldn't you, if you were blowing her phone up like that, just ride down there real quick and see what they're doing? You know, I mean, why wouldn't you? Again, it feels like a nice little ribbon was put on it. Now, at the end of the day, like I said, I don't want to believe that a father or person would do this to another person, right? But we have to look at both sides of it. And I'm also trying to go with what the jury is doing and saying, let's look at him as he didn't do it, he has to be innocent type thing. So, you know, as far as his body language goes, we'll be very interested to see what the channels dedicated to this say. Because to me, what I'm seeing in that is I'm like, okay, this is a person that could be in shock, could be this, could be be that. The things coming out of his mouth are what concern me more because, like I said, everything is a little bit too perfect. You know, can you think of anybody? No, I can't really. But here's all these things that could have happened. You know, but I don't think they happened. But here's all these little, you know, things here. You know, well, Maggie usually isn't. She doesn't really care about, you know, this or that. It's not that big of a deal. But I blew her phone up all these times. You see where I'm going with that? Him bursting out into tears randomly and then doing this, that part I'm not really even considering because at the end of the day, I'm like, I don't know how I would react to that. I know, I mean, at the times I've been very upset, but I've never had something like that. I'm like, this would be shocking, even if you're a part of it. So that part doesn't hold water with me. So again, like I said, I'm trying to look at it like prove him guilty type thing. You know, he's innocent, but give me the evidence to see that he's guilty. Again, my bias is I have followed this case, and so I know not all the ins and outs of it, but I know there's a lot of drama and treachery, right? So, you know, I don't think he's a good person. I think he's very shady. I think he stoops to very low lows, and I don't put it past him with his life falling apart and what was going on that he could have done some really, really bad stuff, right? Paul and Maggie could have been costing him a lot of money and finding out about a lot of stuff that was going to, you know, bring him down even further. Remember, allegedly, he was strung out on all these pills, all this crazy stuff, and he was swindling tons of people and squandering the family business. I mean, things were not good behind the scenes, right? And Maggie was finding this stuff out. I also do think it's interesting that Paul looks like Maggie. Buster looks like him. Buster is still alive. Paul is not. You know, type thing. So I'll be interested to see how much of this narrative is brought out in court, how much the defense is going to use it to try and create a separate narrative to show that Alec didn't do this. If I personally think that, yes, 100%, I could see him doing this himself out of just what we've seen him do. 100%, I could see him having hired someone, gotten somebody else to help, and that's going to help cover up tracks. They could have easily disappeared off into the 1,700 acres. They could have gone down there. They could have pulled up. They could have done this. I mean, I could completely see that happening. And to me, that almost feels more like his style. And so even if that happened, I think I could see Alex still being sad and shocked over, Paul's a good kid, you know, he was this and that. And notice, and this is one thing, notice how he wasn't going on and on about Maggie, right? Now, again, understandable, and I'm not saying that against her, but because we kind of know that, yeah, it wasn't all perfect behind the scenes, and again, that's his son, so he probably would be more like, you know, maybe had more of that bond with the son. So, anyways, let me know what you think down in the comments. If you're still watching, drop some hearts for Paul and Maggie, as well as the other victims, the girl in the boat, the housekeeper, and all the other lives that they have honestly destroyed. I mean, they've done a lot of really bad stuff to a lot of different people. So my heart goes out to everybody, and I hope that they can pick the pieces up and put them back together. So that's it. Thank you for watching. And Roscoe and I, who's still back there, we'll talk to you soon.